If you can't find me this month, I will be out in the garden. March is one of my favorite times in the garden. In today's video, we'll cover the garden tasks that need to be done this month, as well as let you know what vegetables, herbs, fruits, and flowers to add to your garden. I'll also share a few extra tips about how to make sure that your vegetable garden can be successful this year. Stay tuned to the end and I'll give you a quick tour of what's growing in my garden. If we haven't met before, my name's Angela from Growing in the Garden, and I love to share garden inspiration and helpful tips so you can be successful in your own garden. What can you do this month to help you have a successful vegetable garden this year? If you have raised beds, make sure that you are filling them up with good soil. I love to use a mix of compost, vermiculite, and either peat moss or coconut coir in my garden beds. Using this mix helps ensure that there's adequate nutrients, air, and water for the roots and plants that I'm growing in my garden. Filling your beds with good soil is one of the most important parts of vegetable gardening. If you already have good soil in your beds and you've been growing for a while, you may have noticed that the soil level has gone down. Now is the time to fill those beds back up. I like to amend those beds back up with compost. If it's been a while since you've added raised bed mix to your beds, add in some more raised bed mix. Filling your beds all the way back up takes advantage of all the room there is to grow in your beds and gives the plant's roots the access to the most soil, air, and water possible. If you've been gardening for a year or more and aren't seeing the results in your garden beds that you would like, consider having your soil tested. You buy a soil test kit, you can get them online, they're shipped to your house. Take a soil sample, put it in the mail, and then within a week or two, your results will be available online. I love using the soil test kits from My Soil Testing. This is not a sponsored post. And my favorite part is after the test, when you see the results of your test, they will give you recommendations and instructions to get your soil where it needs to be. The next thing to focus on for your garden is the watering. Especially here in the low desert, water is such a valuable resource. We want to make sure that we're watering our gardens effectively and efficiently. Using some sort of drip irrigation in your garden is the best. Drip irrigation is great because it applies the water exactly where it's needed so it can seep down into the roots. You don't want to get water on the leaves of your plant. Water on the leaves can cause problems with disease. March is a great time to evaluate your watering system. Ideally, raised beds will be on their own timer. You will water raised beds on a different schedule than you would water the other landscape trees and shrubs on your property. Each time you want to water as deep as you can in your bed. Note how long it takes you to water your beds deeply, and that's the amount of time that you'll water your beds each time. What's going to change is how often you water your beds. When it's cooler, you'll water your beds less often. When it's warmer, you'll water your beds more often. So now let's talk about what to plant. Because of our hot Arizona summers, it's important to get tomato and pepper and eggplant and tomatillo transplants in the ground early in the month. Getting them planted early gives them the best chance of growing and establishing those nice deep roots before the heat of summer comes. If you have existing peppers and tomatoes and eggplants in your garden that are doing well, that's great. You may want to trim them back a little bit, give them a good dose of fertilizer and a deep watering, and those plants should perk back up and take off. So it's also important to get those cucumbers in the ground, and you can plant those from seed or transplant. They do best from seed, but if you find some young transplants, those are fine. As temperatures heat up, cucumbers can get bitter, so you want to get those growing and harvesting before temperatures get too hot. You can actually add asparagus to your garden this month. It may take a couple of years before you harvest those first spears, but it will give you asparagus for years and years to come. March is the best month to plant watermelon here in the low desert. Watermelon does great, started from seed directly in the garden. March is also a great time to add blackberry and grape transplants to your garden. March is also a great time to add ginger and turmeric rhizomes to your garden. Other transplants to add to your garden this month are artichokes, cucamelon, sweet potatoes. Seeds to plant this month are Armenian cucumber, cantaloupe, carrots, corn, Malabar spinach, pumpkin, radishes, summer squash, and winter squash. As temperatures warm up towards the middle of the month, add beans, edamame, lima beans, okra, peanuts, roselle hibiscus, and asparagus beans. Flowers are a beautiful part of any landscape or garden, and March is a great time to add flowers to your garden. One of my favorite summer blooming flowers that takes the heat like a champ is sunflowers. From multi-stem to mammoth varieties, you can plant sunflowers in the low desert from February all the way through July. Sunflowers do best started from seed. Find a few different varieties and add them to your garden. The perennial vine purple lilac vine is in bloom this month, and it is gorgeous. It's a really low maintenance perennial vine. March is a great time to plant container roses. Although the weather is still cool, it will be heating up soon. Think twice before adding a lot of cool season annuals to your garden. Instead, as spots open up, add more heat-loving and warm weather annuals to your garden. Wildflowers planted back in the fall are blooming and gorgeous. If you want wildflowers next year, let them keep blooming and develop into seed, and those seeds will drop and come back year after year. There's several flowers that you can add during the month of March, and here are some of my favorites. Bee balm, coreopsis, cosmos, dianthus, dahlias, desert marigold, desert milkweed, English daisy, 4 o'clock, gaillardia, gazania, globe amaranth, geranium, hollyhock, lisianthus, marigold, tithonia, petunia, ranunculus, rudbeckia, salvia, spilanthes, sunflower, vinca, and zinnia. Let's talk about fruit trees during the month of March here in the low desert. March is a great month to plant many different types of fruit trees, including citrus. Citrus grows really well here in the spring, and planting it in March gives it several months to get established before the heat of the summer comes. So March is also a great time to plant container deciduous fruit trees. Look for varieties that require less than 400 chill hours. If you head to my blog, I have a list of several varieties of different types of fruit trees that do really well here in the low desert. What about existing fruit trees? Let's talk first about citrus. Citrus trees don't require pruning, but if you're going to prune, March is a good month to do it. If you want to prune out dead limbs or crossing branches or prune it for shape a little, that's fine. If you didn't fertilize your citrus back in February, get that citrus fertilized this month, always watering well before and after you fertilize. March is also a good time to take a look at your citrus and see if there is any exposed bark. It's a good time to either paint it or use a tree wrap to cover up that exposed bark. What about deciduous fruit trees? Hopefully you pruned those fruit trees back in February, but if you haven't, this is your reminder. Get those fruit trees pruned. The next thing to do is once those blooms appear on your fruit trees, it is the best time to give them a nice dose of fertilizer. Same thing, water well before and after you fertilize to allow that fertilizer to penetrate into those roots. Once the blossoms are done, you'll see the small fruits on the trees. If you want big delicious fruit, it's very important to thin that fruit. Typically thin most of the fruit to between 6 and 7 inches apart. The earlier you thin the fruit, the better. Pruning, fertilizing, and thinning will help you have delicious fruit from your deciduous fruit trees. Let's talk about what to do with herbs this month. Harvest and preserve all you can from the cool season herbs that are growing well, like cilantro and dill. Here are some of my favorite herbs that we can add to the garden this month. Basil, bay, chamomile, garlic chives, ginger, lavender, lemon balm, lemongrass, mint, parsley, sage, thyme, turmeric, and yarrow. March is a really good time to look around your entire landscape and evaluate what's going on. The great thing about March is you can plant just about every perennial, tree, bush, shrub in your landscape this month. So if you're going to make a change, March is the month to do it. If something isn't thriving in your landscape, there are usually 3 main reasons why it's not thriving. First off, it may be sunlight. Maybe it's getting too much sun, or maybe it's getting not enough sun. Not all plants can tolerate full afternoon summer sun. The second thing that could be going wrong is it may be a watering issue. There may be either it's getting too much water, or maybe there's a broken emitter and it's not getting enough water. The third thing that could be happening is maybe there is a drainage issue in that particular location. If a plant dies, try to evaluate what happened so that you can keep from making that same mistake again. Once you've taken out the plant, make sure that emitter is functioning and working well. And if you think it might be a drainage issue, dig a hole and then fill it with water. And if that water doesn't drain down within an hour or two, you may have a drainage issue there. You may have to dig down and remove rocks to make sure that that water drains out. If you're adding a new plant to your landscape, look at the mature size. Allowing enough room for that plant to get to maturity keeps you from having to cut it back all the time, and all that shearing and cutting back is really hard on the plant. It's best to give that plant enough room from the beginning. The month of March is a great time to evaluate and make any changes or fix anything that's not working on your irrigation system. As temperatures heat up, your plants are going to rely on that watering system for enough water. Now is a great time to make sure that all the emitters are working, that there's no leaks, and that it's running well. One thing I did last year that has made a big difference to me is I added this Ratio irrigation timer. It's a smart irrigation timer that I can turn on and off and program from my phone. This is not a sponsored post. I bought mine on Amazon just like everybody else, but I love it. It makes it easy when I'm fixing something to turn it on, check for a leak, turn it off. If we get rain, it's simple to turn off my timer. Most of all, find something that works for you and make sure that system is running well. As temperatures begin to heat up, plants will need additional water. Remember that general principle of watering deeply and less often. You want to water all of your trees, shrubs, bushes deeply so that the water will penetrate the root zones, and then let them dry out a bit between waterings. Watering your plants just a little bit every day produces a short root system that's really hard on your plants. March is also a great month to prune your plants here in the low desert. Don't be afraid to give some of those shrubs a heavy pruning. Pruning them heavily in the spring is a much more effective way to control growth and prune for shape than shearing those same shrubs. Shearing shrubs is really hard on the shrubs and ultimately leads to untimely deaths in those shrubs. So we don't need any cupcake, lollipop looking shrubs. If you haven't already, prune your established roses this month too. Help your plants get ready for summer by applying a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch on the plants in your yard. Mulch does several things. It helps prevent weeds. Mulch also helps prevent moisture loss. It helps regulate the temperature of the soil as well. Adding mulch really is an effective way to help your plant during the summer months. Adding an organic mulch is even better because ultimately that breaks down and adds organic matter to the soil. Hopefully this video has given you some ideas for some things that you can do in your own garden to have your best garden yet. Thank you so much for watching.